Hello, and welcome to the MMA Mic Drop Podcast. This is episode number 9. My name is Jade Bunky, and I am joined by the one and only Milo McGregor. You know him on Instagram as Milo McShredder. In today's episode, we are going to talk about the return of Conor McGregor and the possible return of Jorge Masvidal. In addition, we are going to break down the top 5 fights we each want to see in 2024. But before we begin, let me say very sincere thank you to all of you for making us the fastest growing new MMA podcast in the world. Please continue to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and please drop a comment. We'd like to know what you have to say. All right, Milo, let's get started. Big news, Conor McGregor is set to return, but he's not returning for UFC 300 as many anticipated. Instead, he is returning in June for International Fight Week. I actually think this is a smart decision by the UFC, and I'll explain in a moment, but I know you wanted to see him fight at UFC 300. Are you a little disappointed? How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I'm pretty bummed on that because I'm not trying to wait to June. I feel like it's going to ruin a lot of hype on it and everything because people are, they're not going to be able to remember it as much, especially the casual fans. They're not going to really oh, I forgot they're fighting in June now, so I feel like it's not going to be as cool.
Yeah, so for you feel like this whole thing is just it continues to drag on for so long. You think over time people would lose interest, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly what I think.
Yeah, and it is interesting because you started to see a little bit of this in terms of people were losing interest in the opponent in terms of Michael Chandler, right? Now, and it kind of speaks to, hey, if this fight was made, right after the tough finale, people would be all into it. I think people are still excited to see McGregor return. I think this is still going to be a pretty massive return. But I do hear you. I do think a lot of people are disappointed that he's not on UFC 300. I'm actually glad he's not on UFC 300. When I created the ideal UFC 300 fight card, which all of you should check out, we have 79,000 views right now as we're recording this. So a lot of people are interested in what we had to say there. But I thought I created a very compelling fight card without Conor McGregor. And my rationale there is essentially the same in that you need to think about how you sell fights, not just UFC 300, but throughout the entire year. If you have all these new people watching UFC 300, because you're going to get a lot of casuals, a lot of people that don't normally tune in, you can use that as a promotional tool to market future fights. You also have to take into consideration about all the salaries and how much money the UFC is going to be paying fighters and so forth at UFC 300. So I thought this was a great move. And in addition, I don't want to see somebody headline a major event who's been out for a few years. That doesn't appeal to me. Now, don't get me wrong. I want to see Conor McGregor fight. I think that would be cool. But I'd rather him have his own event where he's, clearly the star of that particular event, and you don't have any title fights below him or anything like that. So I'm actually pretty stoked, but I know we have differing opinions there. But let's move on to Jorge Masvidal. Milo, it looks like Jorge Masvidal is unretiring. What are your thoughts about that?
I did not expect that at all. I didn't expect that return at all. I don't really know what he's going to try to do. Maybe he's going to try to get a celebrity fight or something, but I don't know. I'm not 100% sure why.
So you're thinking that his return might not necessarily mean a return to the UFC. It might be a boxing match. It might be something with some big money. It might be something that's more of a novelty event. That's what you're thinking?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking along those lines.
Yeah, it is interesting. Jorge Masvidal is a fun personality. Definitely like watching him fight. So I thought that was some pretty interesting news as well. All right, so here's what we're going to do now. We are going to break down the top 5 fights each one of us wants to see in 2024. So let me start with number 5. The fight that I want to see in 2024 at number 5 is Leon Edwards versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now, Leon Edwards is expected to make his return at UFC 300, but most people expect it to be against Belal Muhammad, and that could very well be the case. I just don't think it should be the case. Yes, Belal Muhammad has the longer win streak, but I don't think he has the better win streak. I think how you win matters, and Shavkat's been finishing everybody. So you might say, well, didn't the UFC guarantee Bilal Muhammad a title fight in his next fight? Okay, if that's the case, you can still make that happen, and you can make that happen by having him fight the winner of Shavkat and Leon Edwards without having him fight until then. And that's how you can keep your that's how you can keep your word. That's how you could still make the fight that fans want to see. I don't think there's a pretty big appetite for watching Shavkat versus Bilal Muhammad, particularly at UFC 300. I don't think that's the most interesting fight to make. Somebody said it, I think perfectly, and I wish I wish I could recall who it was so I could give this person credit for mentioning it. But he said this was more like a co-main event on a pay-per-view as opposed to a fight at UFC 300. So if you have Shavkat, it's a fight that people want to see. It's a fight that's more compelling. And I think you can make an argument it's deserved by Shavkat while at the same time not completely burning Bilal while still giving him the winner without having him fight again until then. What are your thoughts?
I think that would actually be like a way more interesting fight than Bilal because a lot of his fights go to decision. So I don't think that's gonna happen though because
Yeah.
they've been like really like I don't know like informant about how they're gonna fight each other, and a lot of people know it. I think they're gonna be on UFC 300 probably. I don't even know, they're probably gonna be like the first fight on the main round or something, the main card.
Main card, yeah. That's a pretty good idea. If you're gonna do kind of a lackluster title fight, it is still a title fight, right? So there is some weight into it, and if you're going to put it on UFC 300, it might as well be the opening or the second one, depending, on what you have. I don't know if you want to open the card with something that might be a little boring, but then again, who knows? I mean, styles make fights. It could be an interesting fight. I just know there's not a big appetite for those two individuals to match up. It's not the most compelling fight to make. So with that said, what's number 5 on your list of the fights you want to see in 2024?
Number 5 for me, I kind of just thought of a little bit ago. I put Saint Denis versus Dustin Poirier. I think that will be like a firefight. That'll be like a lot of blood.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I wasn't even thinking about that because I was more looking at moving Benoit Saint Denis up a little more slowly, like maybe a Bobby Green or somebody in those early top 15 rankings, not jumping all the way down to Dustin Poirier, but as a fight, my goodness, I would love to see that. I think that's awesome. That you're right. I think that would be pure violence at its best. All right, number 4 for me is I want to see Islam versus Oliveira 2. Now, a lot of people are interested in Justin Gaethje versus Islam, which I'd love to see that too. I think that's a great fight there. I think why this fight is so interesting, is because I don't think it's going to look like anything like the first fight. See, when Charles Oliveira took that first fight, I think he was under the belief that he could out grapple Islam on his back. I think he underestimated the effectiveness of Islam's wrestling. And I think with a new training camp, a new strategy, I think that fight might look a lot different. I'm not saying Oliveira is going to win, but I think it's going to be a lot closer and he might win. And that's what I want to find out. That's why I want to see it. I think it will be a fascinating fight just because I think Oliveira will employ a different strategy. Because if you remember in the first fight, I think he ended on his back pretty quickly and kind of welcomed Islam on the ground. And that was a strategic mistake. And then Islam controlled him for that full round. Milo, what are your thoughts about that?
I have that on my top 5, but it's a little bit higher.
All right.
I think that's basically the best fight you can make in that division by far.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
no, I don't want to talk about it too much because that's my fight's a little bit higher, so I'll talk about it.
Okay, so we will get to your fights. What's your number 4 fight right now?
For number 4, I have a women's fight. I have Grasso versus Weili. This will be one of the biggest women's fights of all time. I think a lot of people want to see that fight, and I actually want to see it.
I would love that fight. And it's funny, I first heard about that from the senior editor at SureDog.com, Ben Duffy, who was a guest on our last program. And, I didn't see the social interaction between the two that, when they were talking about it. And once you mentioned that fight, I started to think, wow, I want to see this fight so badly. I would absolutely love to see that fight. And this is a fight they could still make at UFC 300, which would be incredible. Because there's a lot of people that are talking about UFC 300 as not being that good, but the card hasn't been built yet. There's only been a couple fights, and there's still so many good fights that can be made, including some of the fights that we're selecting in our top 5. So with that said, we're going to move to number 3. I would like to see Ian Gary fight Jack Della Maddalena. Now, Jack Della Maddalena, he is fighting Gilbert Burns at UFC 299. Now, Gilbert Burns is number 5. I think he beats Gilbert Burns in that fight. And Ian Gary is fighting Jeff Neal at UFC 298. Now, if he wins and JDM wins, that's a fight I'd like to see. 2 strikers, 2 guys that can bring it. We know Ian Gary brings a whole nother world of chaos with him, with everything that's going on with him in the media right now. But I think that would be a fantastic fight. What are your thoughts?
I agree, but I think Jack Della Maddalena will destroy him. I don't think it will be a close fight, but it'll be fun to watch.
It'll be fun to watch. Yeah, exactly. All right, who's number 3 for you?
Number 3, I would have put a little bit higher about a week ago, but Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. After it getting pushed back so far, I probably would have put it on number 1
no
right
matter
now.
what. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it'll be a better fight than people expect. I think a lot of people think Michael Chandler's gonna knock Conor out, but I think he'll win.
It's interesting because, and this is, again, one of the things that Ben Duffy said, the last thing that goes is power, right? And with that left hand, Conor McGregor can still knock out somebody in the same weight division. No question about that. And I think Michael Chandler's a really fun matchup for him. The thing with Michael Chandler is he always wants to put on a show, and he doesn't always make the most strategically sound decisions. He wants to really throw down, which is fun for fans, but not always good for winning fights. So he may take the path of most resistance to fight Conor McGregor, and that's maybe just a stand-up war instead of just taking him on the ground and trying to wrestle him. So that could deliver.
And I think Ben Duffy was saying Justin Gaethje versus Conor McGregor. Is that right?
Which I thought was cool too.
I was thinking about it, and I think that would just be a death sentence for Conor. I think Michael Chandler's definitely a better call for him and the UFC. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Chandler is more beatable than Justin Gaethje right now, and I think you make that fight, the Justin Gaethje McGregor fight, if you want that to be McGregor's last fight. Like if he's coming in one fight and he's going to be done. I mean. And that's more appropriate at UFC 300, that magnitude of a fight. But yeah, I agree with you there. All right, so we are down to number 2. The fight I want to see is Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis. Now, I think Dricus du Plessis is going to win in January. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of fights for Izzy, whether it's Dricus du Plessis, whether it's Sean Strickland if he wins, or even if it's Pereira 3, which should be hint UFC. You have 3 possibilities to get Israel Adesanya on UFC 300, which I think is an appropriate person to headline that card because he has been the biggest star in McGregor's absence. So that's what I want to see. Number 2, what are your thoughts?
For number 2, for this to happen, Johnny Walker would have to beat Ankalaev. So for number 2, I'm gonna put Johnny Walker versus Alex Pereira. That'll probably be one of the UFC's biggest fights ever because those people are just such big characters.
Well, what's funny about that? They're fighting in January, Ankalaev and Johnny Walker, and Johnny Walker has the potential to knock Ankalaev out. Ankalaev is the better all-around fighter, but again, anything can happen. If he starches Ankalaev, Johnny Walker's number 7, Ankalaev's number 3. You could therefore make a compelling argument. Johnny Walker, Alex Pereira, at a fight about a fight no one even had on the radar for the light heavyweight title at UFC 300, the co-main event.
Yeah, I think that would be like a super fun fight with a lot of hype and easily like the main card. I mean,
yeah, no doubt that's on the main card. Are you saying you'd put that at the top, like you'd have that headline above?
Yeah.
Israel Adesanya.
Headline,
wow. Yeah. I mean, and it could be. I mean, but yeah, that is that would be a fascinating fight where you just need some pieces to fall into place, but that would be really cool. All right, number 1, the fight I want to see most in 2024 is Tom Aspinall versus John Jones. I've completely lost interest in John Jones versus Stipe. Stipe's too old. That is just completely uninteresting. Before, I had a lot of interest in watching just John Jones fight, but Stipe's been away for so long. I have no desire to watch that fight. I shouldn't say no desire. I have limited desire to watch that fight. Tom Aspinall is the interim champ. John Jones is the champ. Champ versus champ. That's how it should be. That would be the most exciting fight. And I think it will either tell us how good John Jones is or how good Tom Aspinall is. What are your thoughts about that fight?
I don't think that fight's going to happen. I think John Jones is going to commit to fighting Stipe because that's definitely the easier fight. And he could say he beat the heavyweight GOAT and he's the lightweight GOAT. And
yep, and then just drop the mic.
Nobody has a say in anything.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's the smart fight for John Jones, so I'm not hating on him for wanting to, take that fight. It's just, I'd like to see arguably the 2 best heavyweights in the world, which I think right now Tom Aspinall is the best heavyweight in the world. I want to see those 2 throw down. But you're right, he might just fight Stipe, call it a day, retire, and that's still his legacy. He completes his legacy without a blemish, which is pretty important as well.
Yeah.
All right, so I think I know who's number 1 then for you. Process of elimination.
Charles versus Islam 2. I'm not as excited for it as the first one, honestly, because that fight just had so much hype around it. The Charles versus Islam 1, but I think it's still like by far the most interesting fight, like probably ever in my opinion in the UFC. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean it is an interesting because it's such it's such a contrast in styles in terms of you got 2 grapplers but with completely different types of grappling, right? Charles Oliveira is a submission artist. Islam Makhachev is, that top heavy Dagestani wrestler that is, an expert at control. And we saw once he got on top of Charles that he was smothering, right? And I don't think Charles expected that. So I think, yeah, he will have a different strategy. And I think that's a fight I definitely want to see. All right. Those are the top 5 fights we want to see in 2024. We're going to move on to our next 2 sections. This section is called Kickin' It with Milo. It gives you an opportunity to learn more about Milo, who is one of the nation's top up-and-coming amateur surfers, as well as apparently an expert at predicting fights as well. He's done quite well with his picks. So with that said, for all of you that have been watching, or for all of you that are watching, you might have also noticed on the news there's some pretty big surf here in Southern California. Milo, tell me about your best day out. I know the waves have been really good the last couple days.
I think maybe 3 days ago was the biggest day, and me and my friend were like, we missed the wave, and we were paddling back out, and all of a sudden, wave of the day comes, and we're on the inside, just sitting there, and we just get smothered. And a guy falls right in front of me on the wave.
Oh no!
Rolled, yeah. We got so worked, but I ended up being fine. My board was somehow fine, not a ding in it, but yeah.
Oh, nice.
I think that was the most exciting.
Awesome. Where did you surf that day?
28th Street. So
yeah, 28th is good on a big northwest swell. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Next part. Another question for you. Has either your mom or your dad have they gotten mad at you today?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my mom.
Oh, your mom. That's surprising because your mom's, you know, not only a better human being than your dad, just a more chill person. So
Wait, Cheeto. Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot this. When I was surfing 28th Street, Chito Vera was out there.
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Did you talk to
Yeah.
him?
Yeah, I did. I was talking to I was debating on asking him to come on our podcast, but I was kind of nervous. He might beat
All
me
right.
up.
All right. Well, I think you need to ask him, but no, that's cool. That's cool. I'm glad you were chatting with him.
Yeah.
So, no, that's awesome.
Oh, and my mom, she got mad at me because I wasn't prepared.
Prepared for what?
Life.
Yeah. Well, you
My
definitely
my
don't
mom
prepare for the
my
show,
mom told
so
me to say that. My mom told me to say that.
you are not prepared for life. That is true. But you're 16. How
Yeah.
prepared can you be? So
More prepared.
more prepared. Absolutely more prepared. Yeah. Yeah. You definitely need to be more prepared on this show, um,
Jeez.
but that's all good. So moving on to our last segment, Kook of the Week. Do you have a Kook of the Week?
Yeah, it's you. I have to
Why
give it
am I
for
the
that,
Kook
for
of the
that.
Week?
You have a Boof T-shirt on, whatever that thing is. You have to take that thing off.
Yeah, no, you know it's funny. I'm for some reason I'm out of t-shirts and I'm like, oh god, I got to get into my dry clean clothes and wear a collared shirt. So,
You've won the black one every single podcast I've noticed.
well, I have a variety of black shirts, but yeah, I've just worn. Yeah, this is the first time I've worn a collared shirt. So, yeah. So, all right. So I'm Kook of the Week. I think is this my second honor? Thank you
I
for
don't
clapping.
know. It's up there. It's up
All
there.
right, all right. My Kook of the Week is Ian Gary. Ian Gary criticized Sean Strickland for crying in an interview that was about his childhood trauma. I thought that was like super messed up. I don't think you go there when it comes to childhood trauma. So Ian Gary is the Kook of the Week. With that said, any last word before we go?
Drop the mic.
We're out.